What's up, y'all, and welcome into the Jack Vita Show. I'm your host, as always, Jack Vita, and we're back today previewing another division in our MLB preview series. Today, it's the American League West, and if you watch the NL West preview, you can tell I'm wearing the same clothing. So yes, I taped the NL West one earlier today. This is the second one. It's all about the West. We are taping this just to give you guys a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. We're taping this on March 4th. So the chances are you're listening to this in a couple of weeks, maybe a few weeks. Maybe GCU has made it to the Sweet 16 by now. And that's why I'm rocking my Grand Canyon University shirt. But some of the stuff we're talking about might be a little bit dated. It's possible that some big free agents get added potentially, maybe by one of the teams in this podcast. So at the time of this recording, there are still a couple big free agents on the board, and maybe they come into play later. Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell. So just so you guys all know, we're taping this. We don't know where those guys are going at this time. So, with all that said, we are going to break everything down in the AL West. If you guys like what you hear today, please hit subscribe here. We've got a new YouTube channel here. This is the Jack Vita Show Sports channel. I've moved all of our sports content over to a new channel. Entertainment content, reality TV, all that stuff is on the original channel. So hit subscribe. You won't want to miss out on what we've got, and we'll be giving you baseball and sports content all year long. All right, joining us for the fifth year in a row for our AL West preview, we've got Anthony Franz, meteorologist in San Antonio.
Yep.
And
Right,
joining us now, great to have you here, Anthony. And also, having the first time we've had him on for one of these previews, but probably like the fourth or fifth time I've had him on this show it's Rhett Bollinger, who covers the Los Angeles Angels for MLB.com. Rhett, it's great to have you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
So we've got Anthony here, big time Texas Rangers fan. We call him Tex. Tex, congratulations, man. We gotta give you your props. Last year, every single year, this guy comes on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He's way higher on the Rangers than anybody else I know, and he was very, very right.
I was on it this year, Jack, or last year, Jack. I mean, I didn't say they would win the World Series. That was a welcome surprise for me too. But I did say last year in the podcast they'd make some noise. I predicted a wild card, and I'm pretty sure I predicted 89 wins, which they won 90. So I was pretty close on that one.
And I got to read the text that you sent me. This was a text. I was very hesitant. I was not high on the Rangers last year. And I was doing the weekly power rankings for Sports Illustrated, and I was very slow on ranking the Rangers up there. On Friday, April 21st, Anthony texts me. I listened to your last podcast episode. It's time to buy in on the Rangers. Then he says, watch out for Evan Carter. He's 20 years old and mashing in AA right now. Could be a call-up later this year. We could definitely use another outfielder, and he might be it. He was it, Anthony.
Yeah. I mean, he had 122 at bats between the regular season and between pretty much September and the postseason, and his OPS was nearly 1,000. So we'll take that anytime.
He had just turned 21. And he's on it seemed like he was on the desk every single night on Fox talking with A-Rod and Big Papi.
Just a kid,
gosh.
Born in like 2003 or something like that. Just came up, started raking, hit for more power than expected in September, and didn't hit for as much power in the playoffs. I think he only had one home run against the Rays in that wild card round, but he just kept hitting for average, kept hitting doubles. I think he actually set a postseason record for doubles in a single postseason as a rookie. So he was a godsend for us, for the Rangers last postseason.
So before we dive into everything this year, how was that experience for you? First ever World Series championship.
Been waiting for it. I mean, there's been Ranger fans that are waiting for it longer than I have. I'm only 29 years old, but been a fan since I was 6, 7 years old, a diehard fan. I started being a fan when Alex Rodriguez was on the team back in 02, 03, those years. And now that we got through 2010, 2011, some heartbreaking World Series years, that game 6 against the Cardinals in 11, I still have nightmares. But now those nightmares, they don't happen anymore. The World Series is ours. We are the defending champs. When Eric Nadel, our radio guy, he made the call, it just brought goosebumps to every part of my body. And
Any tears?
what a moment.
Any
What was
tears
that?
for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I watched the game over at my brother's house, the clinching game in the World Series, and we both had a few tears, I'm pretty sure, and then brought out the champagne at the end. So something I'll never forget.
All right. Well, what is the outlook on the Rangers going into 2024? Are they repeating? What's your read on this team?
I mean, basically, there's not a whole lot of changes when you look at the lineup, top to bottom. Simeon, Seager, Garcia, Carter, Lowe, Young, Heim. Those guys are all going to be there. Leo de Taveras going to be there in center field. Though, and we're adding, we're taking away our DH and Mitch Garver, and we're adding probably Wyatt Langford. He still has to make the team out of spring training. He may not. The Rangers may decide to keep him in AAA or something to start the year. But the dude can mash. Had a 2 home run game a couple days ago in spring training against the White Sox. A home run before that as well. One of his home runs went 450 feet, and he was drafted in 2023, and he proceeded in like 160 at bats, go through 4 levels of the minors, OPS of like 1200. I'm very excited for the Wyatt Langford area. Him and Carter are going to be roaming the outfield for years to come. I really love the offense. We're adding Wyatt Langford to an offense that led the American League in runs last year. The pitching is where there is some questions. Yet again, it's always what seems to happen with the Rangers. Injuries right now are really going to hurt us, at least to start the year, with Scherzer and DeGrom and Tyler Mahle on the IL to start the year, probably all 3 of them till June or July. So we'll see if what we have right now in the rotation can kind of be good enough until those reinforcements come in the middle of the season.
Rhett, any general thoughts on the Rangers?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of things he said there. I think they're definitely an offensive juggernaut, a team that pretty much brings back almost every piece from last year. I mean, Seager and Simeon are elite. You know, I saw them today in, at least not Seager, but Simeon played today at a home run. Today off Tyler Anderson on a 3-0 pitch. I mean, they're both just elite guys that were, the top 3 for MVP. Pitching wise, you're right. A lot of injury concerns. Even last year, the reason why I didn't pick them, to win the division or to even, win the World Series or something like that. But I thought there's too many injury concerns with the rotation. A lot of guys in that rotation have been hurt historically. Even, Heaney, these guys have had issues in the past, but last year they got through it. They stayed healthy. We'll see, how it goes this year with some of those guys. And obviously the big names we know of coming back from injury later in the year, see how they fare. And if they can give them a big, kind of push there later in the season. But right now they do lack a little bit of starting pitching depth, which is probably their biggest issue. And maybe why some people might pick the Astros or maybe even the Mariners ahead of them in the division. But to me right now, the Rangers, the defending world champions, until they're knocked off that throne, I think they're, the best team coming back with that offense right now. It's pretty scary from 1 through 9. So they're going to be a fun team to watch and just kind of see if that, I think the bullpen's pretty solid too. It's just going to be if that rotation can get enough innings to be healthy enough there.
Yeah, it's been money well spent is what I think about with the Rangers. Now, the DeGrom thing has not worked out yet. The Scherzer thing, I don't know about that one either. But they really hit on Seager and they really hit on Semien, and I don't think there's a better middle infield in baseball right now. Love their lineup. And what we're talking about with the pitching, I think it's important to point out that they probably are not going to re-sign Jordan Montgomery. And he was one of their big guys in the postseason. I think that's going to be a big loss.
And they still might sign him. We can't discount it. I think it's Rangers and Red Sox right now are the two favorites. Red Sox may have a slight edge on them from what I've read. I'm not a big baseball insider or anything like that. But they still could get him. And then you have Evaldi, John Gray, Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunning. None of those guys, maybe besides Evaldi, are superstars for that matter, but they're all solid, and I think they're all going to be good enough. I think to win a lot of games early in the season until we get those reinforcements. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully good things happen.
I'm a big Evaldi fan. I mean, if you gave me the choice of any pitcher to start one game, it's an elimination game right now. He might be the guy that I pick.
Dude
in fact,
was
he probably
nails
is the guy that I pick.
in the postseason last year.
Yeah, he's got a great history of it too. He did it with the Red Sox too, and yeah, he's definitely got a lot of clutch performances in his history for sure.
Yeah. So, thoughts on the bullpen? I mean, the bullpen really pitched. It seemed like above it. It was like punching above its weight in the postseason.
It was. That was the big question heading into the postseason. That was their biggest kind of blemish in the regular season, was honestly how historically bad they were at like late inning situations. I think they were the first ever team to make the playoffs. They blew more saves than they converted. It was a pretty bad and astonishing stat that happened there. But once the playoffs happened, Josh Spores was amazing. Leclerc was very good as well. Chapman was serviceable. He's not there anymore, obviously. He's a Pittsburgh Pirate, and I'm not too mad about it. And we have some reinforcements. Kirby Yates on a contract. David Robertson is a Texas Ranger now. So I think the bullpen could be a strength. There's a lot of question marks. Bullpen, it's pretty volatile. Some of these bullpen guys, you can have a really big season, and then the next year it's not so great. It's kind of very up and down. I like where they stand, though. It's not going to be one of the best bullpens in the big leagues, that's for sure. But I think they can be good.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're a pretty solid bullpen all around. They're not, a lead or anything, but I think they're certainly good enough to hold leads and not be a weakness for this team. I do think, like I said earlier, I think their biggest strength is just that offense. I mean, pretty good defense too, but really their offense really kind of powers this team. And if the rotation can stay healthy, I think that's kind of the big thing. But I think the bullpen isn't a weakness, but it's not like it's elite, but it's certainly solid enough. Absolutely.
So we'll give credit to FanDuel. I mentioned this in the podcast I recorded earlier today. I have no partiality to FanDuel. I just Googled over-under win totals. FanDuel, congrats on your SEO ability because you came up first. So we've got FanDuel has the Rangers at 88.5. Rhett, I'll let you go first. Over or under 88 wins?
Well, that's a good one. So last year they won 90?
Yeah, 90.
I think
they were tied. They were tied with Houston at 90, but Houston got the tiebreaker.
I like the over there. I like them more than I like the Mariners, and the Astros I still like a lot too, though. Truthfully, this year again, but yeah, I think above. I wouldn't say that a lot above, but I could see them winning, low 90s. But a lot of it too is health. I mean, even Seager, there's a guy that gets hurt historically too. So I mean, he can stay healthy a whole year. But last year he got missed some of the season, or else I don't think he would have won MVP over Ohtani, but he certainly put up pretty amazing numbers in the short amount of from some of the time he missed there. So. But yeah, so there is some of that risk, but I do think that if they can stay healthy, absolutely they can hit the over on that.
Anthony?
Well, you know where I'm going, Jack. I mean, after a World Series win, the offense is going to be amazing. I think adding White Langford, like I said, that's a big factor there. Hopefully he's able to make that team out of spring training and play a big role, which I think he can. And I'm predicting he'll win Rookie of the Year in the American League, and that's going to help us to a 94 win season, going with the over.
Is that a division title too?
That is a division title. 94 and 68, first in the AL West.
I think that so they won 90 last year, and this is 88.5. I think this is a fantastic number for the Rangers, because I do think that if they don't bring back Montgomery, and I don't know. I have some concerns about the starting pitching, but one thing I like that you said, Brett, it's not just their offense; it's their defense. These guys are great. They're a great fielding team. So I think they're gonna be a playoff team. I put them. I think they're gonna be somewhere between like 86 and 90 wins. So I guess I'll average that out and I'll go slightly under and say 88. I think that number's great.
You always go 88 on them, Jack. I mean, you always go under on them is what I meant.
Someone's got to balance things out a little
Yeah.
bit. We got to have different opinions on here. Okay, so yeah, last year I think I said like 78. So that's good news if you are a Rangers fan. That means that they're going to win 12 more games than I said, which means they win 100 this year.
I won't complain.
Okay, Rhett. Take it away on the Los Angeles Angels. This is a team, obviously, that you're out at spring training right now. You're seeing them every single day. Lost Shohei Ohtani. What's your preview? What's your read on this team?
Yeah, definitely a different vibe this year for sure. No Shohei Ohtani, which means a lot less media in camp, of course, and kind of the circus that he brings. Usually we're used to having 30, 40 reporters covering the Angels every day, like they do with the Dodgers now. And now we're down to about 2 or 3 of us most days. So it's kind of funny just the way that's changed. But it's been more relaxed at camp. The players have kind of been around more in the clubhouse. It's been a kind of a different vibe. And I think a lot of it, too, is the new manager, too, in Ron Washington, a guy who has been there and done that, as I'm sure Tex or Anthony knows, with a couple of World Series appearances with Washington, back in the day there in 2010, 2011. Had a good run with the Rangers there from 2007 to 2014. Brings a lot of energy, and then obviously he's a defensive guru, a guy that was with the Braves, the last few years here, and really helped develop some of their infielders into elite guys that were Gold Glove winners. And the Braves, were one of the best teams in the last few years. We're great at base running and being aggressive. I think he's a big part of that, and he brought over a lot of coaches from the Braves, including Eric Young Sr., who's kind of a base running expert, and Bo Porter, a former manager in the division with the Astros. So a new coaching staff, I think, is really kind of helping things too. But the truth is, Shohei Ohtani is just a lot to lose from a team that already only won 83 games last year. So to lose a 10-win player like Shohei, and then not really do that much this offseason is tough for them. I mean, they improved the bullpen. They made several bullpen signings, including Robert Stevenson to a 3-year deal worth $33 million to kind of be their top setup guy. But that was kind of really it. They didn't do too much on the position player side outside of signing Aaron Hicks for the league minimum. So it's a team that it's going to be tough for them to see them getting much better. But they do have a young core they're really going to rely on, with Logan O'Hoppe at catcher and Zach Neto at shortstop, and Shanwell at first base. Reed Detmers in the rotation, Chase Silseth. They've got a lot of young guys in this core. Mickey Moniak in the outfield too. So I think they're going to kind of build around that, try to get better. But realistically, I mean, it's going to be hard to see them compete this year. Of course, crazy things can happen, and maybe guys play over their heads, or these young guys really develop quickly, or Trout has an MVP type season. But it's just hard to really replace Shohei when he didn't do too much to kind of add since losing him, in a sense, or their payroll's down this year. So I do think the culture is better under Ron Washington, and I think that there's a chance to kind of lay that foundation and be better going forward, and then build these teams around this young core. But they're in a tough spot because they haven't really done too much to improve their team, and losing the best player in the world, even if he did come with a lot of distractions and everything, it's still pretty impossible to replace for them.
Yes, and I mean, their 2 highest paid position players have struggled to stay on the field over the last couple of years. Obviously, Rendon only played 43 games last year, but Mike Trout, I mean, he unfortunately has not had the same durability that he once did early in his career. At least he hasn't recently. And it kind of breaks my heart seeing Mike Trout get hurt, because he is just such a phenomenal player. I mean, this is our generation's Mickey Mantle, and in order for them to compete, they need both those guys to play at least a little more than they did last year.
Yeah, even more, more than just a little more. I mean, Ohtani, Trout last year, I think he, played 80 games. He's only averaged about 80 games over the last 3 years. And, same with Rendon. He's been hurt for the last 3 years as well. Can't get him on the field together. And the same thing when they had Ohtani, the three of them in the same lineup was very, very rare. I mean, they just didn't really play together that often. So this year, right, I mean, they got to get both those guys on the field and be productive. Brandon Drury's a pretty good player. Then it's going to be about all those young guys kind of developing and getting better. But in terms of the middle of that lineup, it's going to be a lot, depending on Trout and Rendon, and you don't really know what you're going to get because of the fact they've been hurt. Last year with Trout, it was kind of more of a freak injury with that wrist thing, on a swing that was you couldn't really prevent that. Rendon's had all sorts of stuff happen, including, a foul ball off his shin that kind of ended his season there too. So a lot of ifs in this team. That's the hard thing. The good teams don't have as many ifs. They have a roster like the Rangers talked about. You go 1 through 9, there's not really any ifs. The Angels have so many ifs, even at the positions. Can this guy get better? Can this guy this? There's not that many givens. And even Trout, who was a given forever, isn't even a given anymore either. So things can, flip right. Last year, a lot of things went wrong. Like a ton of things went wrong. And so the odds of that many things going wrong again are probably pretty slim. But even if they don't go that wrong, it's still hard to replace what the production they had from Ohtani to be a team that's going to be much better than they were last year or the year before that. So they're in a tough spot, but I do think they at least have the right manager in place and a young core that could get better in time. And I'm curious, as a Ranger fan, what your thoughts are on the Angels.
Yeah, first of all, I love the Ron Washington hire. Loved Wash when he was with the Rangers for several years, and like 07 to 13 or something like that. He was there for quite a while. I was looking up and down the projected lineup that I found online for the Angels, and I love the top of the order. I love Mickey Moniak, and tell me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Nolan Schanuel.
Shanwell, yeah.
Schanuel. Yeah. I mean, he obviously was in last year's draft, right? And he came right up even quicker than my guy Wyatt Langford is projected to come up. Then obviously Mike Trout. So you got a good top of the order there. And I also, top to bottom, obviously there is more question marks, as you mentioned, Rhett, but I looked at a lot of these OPSs aren't that bad. And I looked at the 2023, I did some research. The 2023 MLB average OPS was 732 last year. Seven of the 9 Angels in the projected lineup are at or above that. So it's not a bad lineup as it stands right now. The only 2 that were below that were Rendon and Zach Neto. And if Rendon can be any piece of what he used to be, that would be a big thing for the Angels. And Brandon Drury had a great year last year, 30 home runs, 803 OPS, not 30, 26 home runs, 803 OPS. So they got some players there. We'll just see if they can stay healthy. I think that's the big thing. You both mentioned that Rendon has played in 30% of the possible games over the past 3 years, and Mike Trout's at 49%. So you have some good players there. Staying healthy is a big thing. Obviously, some questions in the starting rotation too. I love Reed Detmers, but it seems like he took a step back last year as well. ERA of around 4.5, which I think they were looking to see him progress a little bit more from his rookie campaign.
Yeah, that was the problem with the rotation last year. Was a lot of the guys took a step backward. I mean, Patrick Sandoval, ERA went up almost a run. Same with Detmer's ERAs went up almost a run too. Tyler Anderson's ERA almost doubled from what it was.
Right, you're right.
So a lot of those guys, you'd think would get better naturally this year and kind of bounce back from that. It's not a given, but that would be the big hope, and that gets the rotation a little bit more solidified. And they've got Griffin Canning coming back, who was mostly solid last year, and kind of more of a prospect type, and a guy that came up pretty quickly too, and Chase Silseth. So beyond that, though, there's not much depth, and that's why they're stretching out one of the relievers, Jose Soriano. And that's why it still would make a lot of sense for them to go out and sign Snell or Montgomery, because they have the money in their budget to go do it. Their payroll is much lower than it was last year. Either one of them would be a major upgrade to that rotation. I don't know if they're just waiting on prices, or they think it's just not worth it at this point. Are they really is that going to be the piece that's going to put them over the top? probably not, but I still think it'd be a big move for this team and for the the clubhouse and even for the fan base to have a little bit of excitement, because right now for the fans, I think they're excited about that young core, but there was nothing really in the offseason to get them excited. And then to lose Ohtani and also to lose them to the rival Dodgers, it was definitely really tough for them. So I think that any kind of positive momentum or anything that would really be good for the franchise, but we'll see where that goes. And maybe they're going to kind of roll with this younger core and kind of see what they have and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, the pitching is really interesting because something you brought up that I had never thought about before, Rhett, was the last time I think it was the last time we did a podcast was right after Ohtani signed with the Dodgers. They made it official. And you brought up the point that, hey, maybe there's a chance that these Angels pitchers could potentially improve by pitching in a normal 5-man rotation as opposed to having that extra day of waiting time.
Yeah, I mean, Ohtani kind of was all really his schedule is kind of the way it all worked. It was all kind of dictated around him and when he was ready to pitch. So now these pitchers, instead of having, 6, 7, 8 days of rest and not really knowing they're going to pitch and having to throw 2 bullpen sessions in between starts, not having that normal every 5th day or every 6th day type of thing, I think, was obviously can keep you a little more fresh and keep your inning total down, but pitchers are kind of creatures of habit, and I think kind of having that normal rotation I think can really help guys kind of get in a rhythm here. But it's going to be interesting to see because it is going to be more innings, though, too, for a lot of these guys. See if they can hold up and stay healthy as well. Because the one thing they have been is a lot of those pitchers have at least stayed healthy. Detmers have stayed healthy, and then Sandoval and those guys. So I think it's just a matter of can they handle this kind of uptick in innings, and they should be able to. I mean, it's more of a normal, every 5 days type of thing. But yeah, I think it could help them with the rhythm and kind of getting on a roll a bit better, rather than kind of not knowing their schedule every 8, 9 days.
And didn't the Angels beef up their bullpen a little bit too over the winter?
Yeah, they signed a lot of guys. They really did. They, a lot of 1-year deals. That Stevenson was the big one, the 3-year deal. They signed, Matt Moore. They brought him back, and he's coming off a good year. And then Luis Garcia has had some good years with the Padres. They brought in Adam Simber, who had good years with the Guardians. Let's see, they brought in Zuniga, a hard-throwing guy from the Cardinals in a trade. They signed Jose Cisnero, who was a reliever with the Tigers. So they brought in a lot of arms and a lot of, guys on big league deals and a couple of flyers. Drew Pomeranz and Hunter Strickland are there on minor league deals as well. So they threw a lot of, kind of 1-year guys. They're hoping maybe a couple of them stick. If they do well, hopefully if they do well, we could even trade them at the deadline if they're out of it. But maybe these guys hit and the bullpen becomes a strength. But you never know with relievers. I mean, some of these guys have a great year and the next year they're not great, and it's just hard to predict. But they're hoping they have enough of those arms that if they can hit on those guys, that it'll help out. And they got Ben Joyce, who's a hard throwing prospect. He throws 104. He's been out here doing pretty well at camp. Although the first outing he did up a grand slam. So they've got some.
I think I saw his debut last year.
Yeah.
He was pitching against the White Sox.
So they've got some intriguing arms in the bullpen too. So and Carlos Esteda's much better first half than second half, but was certainly a good closer last year. So they've got some interesting arms back there, but just all going to be about health again with this team. If they have enough depth, and they just haven't really had that depth in recent years, and it doesn't seem like it got too much better. But like I said before, that the young core is going to be what's going to kind of be worth watching this year for this team.
My prediction, before I give the team prediction, player prediction, I think Logan O'Hoppe is going to be a big breakout star this year. I think that from what I've heard from smarter people than me, who are big on these prospects, I've heard comparisons to that this guy could be Buster Posey, GT Real Muto of his generation type player. He is going to need to be healthy. Obviously, we didn't really mention it. The whole team really struggled with injuries last year. Like they had a lot of guys get hurt. And I think if this team is even without Rendon and without Trout, like if those guys are kind of what they are at this point, if you're only going to get 80 games out of Trout, if the rest of the team is healthier than it was a season ago, I think this team will win more games than it did last year.
I could see that. Yeah, like I said, it's all about that young core and the health of this team. And he said, I do think O'Hoppe is definitely a breakout candidate. Absolutely. He's got a lot of power. Last year in September, I think he hit like 9 homers. I think he, was on pace to hit like 30 or 40 home runs if he would have played a full season. But even he got hurt. He had shoulder surgery last year too. Yep. Was out for 4 months. But you got to figure he's going to be healthy this year, and they want to get him back there for 130 games or so. So he could put up some numbers. Absolutely, he's really got a lot of power, and seems like he's going to be. And he's a leader too. He's going to be kind of the face of this franchise, I think. And it's still Trout's team right now, but I think after Trout, I think it could be Ohapi's team as kind of he could be the face of this franchise. I know the fans already love him, the players do too. He's got that kind of leadership mentality and got to perform and prove it. But I do think he could be a big part of this franchise.
Anthony, any other thoughts before we get to the win total?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm a big of Ohapi as well, and I was just thinking how the whole AL West has some pretty good catchers. Ohapi, Jonah Heim, Shane, Langoliers, and Diaz on the Astros. Some pretty good backstops here in the AL West.
Very, very good. And I was also thinking, I thought, because you were just talking up Wyatt Langford, I thought you were going to say each of these teams has one of those guys, because they also, it seems like each team has like a breakout candidate as well with these young players too.
Yeah,
Great catching division.
So. I'm a big
Great
Mickey
catching
Moniak
division.
fan too.
Yes, yeah. Moniak had a very good year last year, and I know he slumped at the end of the year, but I do think that he's a good player. I think he's legit. I think he will repeat what he did last year, which was, he had an 800 OPS, 280 batting average. The on base wasn't very high, but drove in 45 runs in 85 games, 14 home runs.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of power, a lot of bat to ball skill. Didn't walk much, but I think he'll probably improve on that. He's a young hitter. But yeah, I'm definitely high on him as well. I think former number 1 overall pick, starting to kind of hit a little bit finally, and yeah, finding kind of his role in the team.
Super nice guy too.
Yep, great interview. Probably the best on the team.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Okay, so anyone want to make a prediction as to what FanDuel has the Angels at?
Probably 71, somewhere around there.
Very good, 72.5.
Yeah, I figured it was going to be right around what they're at last year, because you're right. You could see them being better even though they lost Shohei just because so much went wrong. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's probably what I would think. I think they're not going to be, anything like a contending team, but I still see them winning easily 75 to 77 games just by having better health and just having some of those younger players perform better. I think Detmers is a big breakout candidate too in that rotation. I think Sandoval is going to be better. I think Anderson's going to be better. I think Silseth's decent. It's just going to be about how much they get out of Trout for sure, and Rendon to a lesser extent, but definitely because when Trout is Trout, I mean, he can be a 10-win player, like an 8-win player even at this point in his 32, 33 now. So yeah, I mean, you can see it, some things breaking, but I don't see it being worse than last year, even though they did lose Shohei just because so much went wrong. But I don't see them being much better. So I say mid 70s, and they get the over barely there.
Yeah, I didn't know I'm pretty much right on. I didn't know the FanDuel over under there. I'm at 72 wins was my prediction for the Angels. So pretty much right at that over under of 72 and a half. I just think losing Shohei, that's a 10-win player right there. So, and I didn't obviously take 10 wins off of their win total last year because a lot did go wrong for them. I think at the Angels ceiling, they could be a 500 team if everything went right. But probably everything's not going to go right again. They're going to have injuries. Things are going to happen. That always seems to happen to the Angels. I know that we've always mentioned that, Jag, in the last few years, how they seem to underperform sometimes over the past few years. We get high on the Angels, especially when we had Trout and Shohei and the expectations that they had, and seem to always do a little bit under than what they were expecting, and injuries are a big part of that. So I'm going with the 72. They lost Shohei, but they're only going to lose 1 win.
Very well said. I think I'm going to go over, because I think one thing that we should point out with the Angels was last year, they were a contending team up until the trade deadline. I mean, they went for it at the deadline, and were they a great team last year? No, but they were, a little bit over 500. They were solid. They were in the hunt. And then it all just, the very end of the year went so badly, and that's why their record, like, I don't think that last year they were the equivalent of a 73-win team. I think they were more of like an 81-win team. And maybe, and if everyone's healthy, I think they're better than an 81-win team. I think that this team, um, I think they could surprise people in terms of, I think a lot of people see them going in the direction of like, this could be, and I don't think many people have them finishing last because of where Oakland is, but a lot of people think this is going to be one of the, lesser teams in the American League. I think they're going to be I think they're going to be average. I think this is like a more of an average team. I'll go slightly below 500. I'm going to go, I'll say, give me 78 wins.
All right, losing the best player in the world and adding 5 wins to the total. I love to see it.
I mean, look at how many injuries that team had last year.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
They had so many injuries, and Ohtani was part of that. They lost him at the end of the year, which was a big part of why. And I mean, like, do you really think it helps? I mean, Rhett was there to see it all firsthand, but did it help when you go for it and you pick up Lucas Giolito and you get some other like even a Hunter Renfroe who you got in the offseason, and you just put them all on waivers, like entering the final month, or that's like I imagine that was demoralizing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was a rough end of the year all around. So you're right. They weren't in it until early August, and then they lost us 7 games in a row, and then from there it was a total tailspin. So you're right. That's kind of they were at least in contention there for a while. So yeah, I mean it's just hard to see them winning too many more games than they did last year, losing Shohei. But that's why we watch. It'll be fun.
Okay, I guess I'm making a bold prediction here. I guess I have them 5 wins better than last year.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, maybe it's the Ron Washington effect.
Right? Hey. Never know.
Love Wash.
No, I don't think this team's gonna be contending, but I don't think they're gonna be horrible. And I do think that some of these young players could give the fans a little something to watch. And I think Ohtani will be the guy this year. All right, who wants to talk about the Oakland A's?
Let's do
it. Anthony, what do you have in your notes on the A's?
Let's see. Let's bring it up here. Oakland A's. They won 50 games last year. They were 50 and 112. So one of the historically bad seasons. I was looking through their lineup, and a couple interesting guys here. I love Zach Geloff. Great player. He hit 841 OPS last year at 24 years old. I think he's going to take a step up too. He's a stud. I like him. Let's see. I like Shea Langeliers. Brent Rooker had a monster campaign, especially in the first half of the year last year. We'll see if he can stay consistent with that. Probably there's going to be some digression there with his track record, which has never been a 30-homer guy. But he finally did get an opportunity to play every day in Oakland, and he really took advantage of that and had a great season for himself. And Ryan Noda is an interesting guy as well. So they got a few players here. Of course, Ruiz stole like 70 bases too. Doesn't have much pop in his bat, but he is fast. So you got a few guys here that can play. The rotation is not looking great. But you do have a few additions that they've made to the roster with Alex Wood, who definitely is not who he used to be. But he's coming over from San Francisco. Ross Stripling's coming over from San Francisco to be likely in their rotation too. And I do like one prospect, one young guy they have, Joe Boyle, who's already had a very strong spring, was 2-0 and a cup of coffee last year at the end of the season, an ERA under 2. So he's an interesting guy that I think people should watch out for too. Of course, Waldichuk is hurt right now, could come back later on this season. So they got some guys. Obviously, they're going to be in the basement of the AL West, I think. But I do think before we get into the numbers, I do think they're going to have an improvement to that 50-win total.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
Hard not to.
More than 50 games.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing they really only won 50 and had a chance to could have lost or could have won fewer than 50. It's pretty amazing. Another guy you didn't mention is going to be fun to watch. He's going to be a reliever this year. Mason Miller, guy that throws really hard. I saw him in his debut last year against the Angels. I think in the spring training game last week, he was hitting 101 consistently. He's one of the harder throwers in baseball. So they're moving him to relief. He'll be a fun guy to watch. He's not going to close right away, I don't think, but he's going to be a guy for sure to watch with them. And yeah, there's kind of a really young team. And I think Geloff is definitely their best player. It's fun watching Rooker finally kind of break out. He's a guy that I covered with the Minnesota Twins when he was a prospect. He was a big star at Mississippi State and the SEC there. He was a great college player, and they thought he was going to be a can't-miss hitter, probably like a DH type eventually. Didn't really work out there in Minnesota. Same thing kind of way that happened with Mitch Garver too, but went on elsewhere, and Garver's become a great hitter / catcher. And Rooker, had a great year, last year with the A's as a hitter. Did fall off a little bit, but maybe he bounces back here and kind of continues to adjust to the pitchers here. So yeah, it's just a young team, and I figure they're probably going to improve on 50 wins because it's hard not to. But they're not a team that has a ton to excite the fans, and obviously a tough situation overall with the stadium situation and what they're going to do there. And it still seems like a lot of that's kind of up in the air on how they're going to handle that and where they're going to play beyond this year even. So, feel bad for the fans, but hopefully there's, brighter days ahead and some fun players to watch this year.
Yeah, my thoughts on the A's is I just take a look at their statistics from last year. It's an interesting situation where they have a lot of guys who are either at one point a top prospect or are a top prospect, and very few of them have put up high impact numbers so far in their major league careers. So maybe, I think this will be a second year for a lot of guys or a third year. So maybe this is a year where some of those guys take some steps forward. I would hope so. I'm looking at some of these names. You mentioned Langoliers and Estuary Ruiz is another one. And JJ Bleday was a top 5 pick. They got him in the, was that the AJ Puck trade?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. And Soderstrom, I think he was a first round pick. Tyler Soderstrom. Lawrence Butler, I think, was maybe the MVP of the Futures game last year, I want to say. And he didn't really break out. And then Christian Pache was another guy that they got in the, I think that one was the Matt Olson trade. So they've made, and then that's another thing is if you take a look at their return on the Olson, Murphy, Bassett, and Chapman trades, it's not like the typical. The A's are known as, like, when they sell these guys off, it's like, holy smokes, they got 2 of those guys in that trade. They do a really good job of building back up when they have to tear down. And I do think that we'll probably hear about a couple of these guys this year. We'll probably see some steps forward, but I think that's probably the biggest reason why they won only 50 games last year is because they have not seen significant player development from these guys in terms of it always looks good when you have all these guys who are either a top prospect or are currently a top prospect, but it's hard to execute. It's hard to win. It's hard to be a very good Major League Baseball player.
Yeah, it is hard. Yeah, baseball is hard, right?
Yeah. And to that point, Jack, I mean, their lineup right now, they're kind of full scope in the major league level right now is not fantastic, and even below in the minor league level, Bleacher Report has them ranked as the 24th ranked farm system in baseball. So there's not a whole lot coming up there either. So obviously some of these guys have good potential, but as a whole, times don't look good now, and honestly, the next few years don't look great either.
Yeah, it's tough. I say even Mason Miller, who's their, the reliever, he's their number 2 prospect, So for, a reliever to be a number 2 prospect is probably not a great sign. I know he just got moved to that role, so he probably might move down the list at some point. But I think Jacob Wilson's a big shortstop prospect. I know they have the other Max Muncy, but they don't really have too much in the way of a stacked farm system the way that you would expect for a team that's that, bad. Usually if a team's rebuilding, you'd think their farm system would be better, but maybe it will with time. And then maybe they'll have to trade Rooker and try to get, younger prospects too. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they kind of build this team. And like I said, even where they're going to play, they're in a tough spot for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point just about, like, where you typically see teams like this, you see them a little further along in terms of the player development and the prospect rankings. Now, granted, the prospect rankings are only opinions, and there are a lot of times that we've all been wrong on prospects, good and bad. But I do think that I'm glad you brought up those two guys. I saw Max Muncy out at the Fall League. He's the Oakland A's Max Muncy, different Max Muncy, which is funny because the other Max Muncy also started his career with the Oakland A's. But this is a different Max Muncy, and Jacob Wilson. I think that could be a very lethal double play combination in a couple years at the major league level. Other than that, I don't think we have much else to add on the Oakland A's.
What's their over-under,
57.5. 57.5.
Okay. I had them, so if you don't mind me going, I have them, their improvement from the last year to this year, I have them as the biggest improvement of any team in the AL West. But obviously, it's not saying much coming from 50. I have them at a 59-win team, though, so I'm going with the over on that 57.5.
I'm going to go with 55 and say they're just under it still. They're going to be better, like 5 games better, but I don't see them making that big of a jump. They don't have enough good players, and even some of the veterans they added, those guys are probably going to be traded at the deadline anyway. So if they even perform well. So I don't see them making too big of a jump. They don't have enough, like, potential young stars to, like, lift them up. But you never know. Gallup's a good player, and some of these guys certainly are good players, but it's just hard to see them taking a big step forward as a team, I guess.
Well, I think it's interesting because up until I think it was 2 years ago, I think they lost 100 2 years ago. The last time they had lost 100 games was like 1979.
Right.
Like even when the A's are rebuilding, they're typically competitive in games. Like they're not just some team that just gets steamrolled as they have the last couple of years. And I don't really see this team being all that much better from last year. It's all going to depend on how these players develop. And I should say, I think they will be better. I do think that some of these guys will take a step forward. I like Lawrence Butler. I think Lawrence Butler's a really good player. Was it Major League with this whole, like, we have to make the A's terrible so we can move the team?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, 57.5. Oh my gosh. So 57 wins is still losing 105.
Right. So I have them at 59. They're still losing 103. I'm not like high on them. I believe in a few of those young guys.
And Rhett, you said, what'd you say?
55. Yeah.
55. Good numbers, boys. I like, you know what? I think I will go with a very slight under. I'll say 57. These numbers have been very good so far.
There you have it.
The only one that I've been firmly over on or opinionated on was the Angels so far. So, but yeah, I think this A's team is. I feel bad for the fans. But hey, Vegas will be pretty fun, right? All right, let's talk about the Houston Astros. And I'll tease this too. Before we get into the Astros, I forgot to mention this at the start of the show. Mario Lanza has a Seattle Mariners preview for us. He is the creator of the Funny 115. He's got several podcasts. He covers Survivor, a bunch of reality shows, and Saturday Night Live. He has a great movie podcast. I was on his movie podcast talking about Moneyball about a year ago. So we'll play his voice message, but not until after we all wrap up all of our picks because it's like 16 minutes long. So we're going to do Astros now, and we'll finish with the Mariners. That's why we're doing Mariners last. The Houston Astros. Take it away, Tex, your favorite team.
My favorite team, obviously. But it's the Astros. They still have a very, very good team, top to bottom. I was looking at their projected lineup, and it's the same, basically, as it was last year. There's really no noticeable changes at all. Altuve, Alvarez, Bregman, those guys at the top. Kyle Tucker, Jose Abreu, it goes on and on. They have a very, very potent offense, and it's going to stay that way heading into this year. The rotation's very good too. I think I read Verlander may not be ready for opening day, but if he's not, he probably won't take too long for him to get ready for the season. Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, some very good arms there as well. You did see a couple of guys in that rotations take steps back last year, which is why they regressed from 106 wins down to 90 wins from 2022 to 2023. Jose Urquidy, 5.29 ERA last year, and even Christian Javier, who's a very good pitcher, had an ERA of 4.5. So you had a few guys that are capable of doing better that kind of underperformed a little bit in 2023, and some of those guys will probably get a little better this year here in 2024, kind of back to the mean. But still, a very good team. That offense is stacked as it always is. But I will always remember last year, I was actually at Game 7 of the ALCS where the Rangers beat the Astros in Houston, and that was just so sweet. I'll always remember that.
That's awesome. That'd be fun, but the rival especially, that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, by the end of the game, it was a blowout too. Rangers won like 11-3. So by the end of the game, by the 7th inning, all the Astros fans were already leaving pretty much. And by the 9th inning, it was a horde of like probably 5,000 to 8,000 Rangers fans all congregated into the lower bowl and the third base side. And it was definitely an awesome experience.
So it's going to be a fun rivalry this year, too. I mean, they're both going to be the top two teams in the division. I mean, it's going to be fun every time they play each other. They're going to be, their offenses are both just so good from 1 to 9. I mean, Chas McCormick's the guy I didn't talk about, but Chas McCormick's really underrated. I mean, I think Kyle Tucker's probably the most underrated player maybe in the league. They still have Altuve, and Alvarez and those guys. And the big addition, too, to the bullpen, Josh Hader, and the closer is going to be a big addition. Ryan Presley is still already elite as it is. And they have Ryan Presley as their setup reliever. He might be the best setup reliever in baseball now. So, that's a pretty nasty bullpen. And then the rotation still is a little iffy, and it is. It kind of depends on if Urquidy can get better, and if Garcia can take a step forward after Javier, could be a little bit more consistent. I like Framber a lot though, Valdez, and so they have a good rotation, but a little bit more question marks. But I think their bullpen's pretty dominant, and that offense is pretty dominant again too. So I see them being, one of the better teams in the American League again. It's been, a long run of that. I think fans are getting old, getting tired of that, but they're still a pretty elite organization and a team again this year. But similar, I think, to the Rangers in terms of the lineup construction and just the way they're built, where they're a little bit more offense heavy, I think, this year than starting pitching heavy. But both two juggernauts to me, I think, in the American League.
Trivia question. Let's see if either of you know the answer to this one. The most consistent starting pitcher for the Houston Astros last year was
JP France.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Friend
of the show. Now that's an opinion of mine, of course, but he did have.
I knew that. Yeah, he did have answer.
Yeah, what stat measures consistency?
He did have a 3.83 ERA over 23 starts last year. And he had a very, very good year as a not even a top 30 prospect.
Yeah.
So he was consistent though.
Absolutely.
And then it's really interesting though what you mentioned though, Anthony. Framber Valdez looked kind of lost at the end of the year. And he did not look like Framber Valdez. Christian Javier, I don't know what was up with him.
Yeah.
Urquidy, I wasn't shocked by. Urquidy has kind of been trending in that direction for a couple of years now. He did give them that big spot start in Arizona in that final weekend of the season, and I think that's where JP got scratched from the lineup for a family emergency on the Friday, and then Urquidy kind of took he was the hot hand. They rode him in the postseason, and but yeah, I do think that between JP, Brandon Bielek, Hunter Brown, and Ronel Blanco, they've got some promising young guys in that rotation.
Yeah, it's true. They do have a little bit more back end depth than some other teams for sure with those. Yeah, I forgot about Blanco. So yeah, they do have a little bit more of the and Hunter Brown's former top prospects. So yeah, they do have some interesting arms, kind of intriguing there at the back end of that rotation.
Yeah, Hunter Brown has the highest ceiling of that group. But there's some depth there. Like I think they might roll out a 6-man rotation to start the year. And they have been known to do that. They've rolled out the 6-man at different points in time where they just want to line up their rotation differently or give somebody a break. And then this bullpen, oh my gosh, you had Hader with the horses that they have in this bullpen. Is this the best bullpen in the American League?
Definitely could be, because I'm really high on Presley. I love Ryan Presley as a closer, and to him to lose his job, to me, it's crazy for him to be a center reliever for him. Hader, and that's going to be a 1-2 that's going to be pretty tough. But Abreu and Montero and all those guys have been around too. I mean, it's a pretty nasty bullpen. But
they did lose Hector Neris, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But obviously picking up Hader more than replaces that.
Yeah, it's just that 1-2 punch is pretty nasty there for sure.
One thing that's interesting to note is I believe this is Alex Bregman's contract year, and it does not sound like they're. I mean, look, I don't cover the Astros. I'm not an insider. I'm not a beat reporter. However, there have been talks, speculation. A lot of people don't think he will resign. That, or at least they're not going to extend him. He will hit free agency is the expectation. So interesting to see how that changes things for them. Does that make them want to buy a little more at the deadline if they're in a tight division race with Texas and they want to go for another ring? They want to do it with Bregman. Does that change anything for them? I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, Bregman's a big part of that team, but I don't think they're going to try to win for Bregman in a sense. I don't think that's going to be the narrative or anything for them.
Not to win for Bregman, I just mean
build
in
around
terms
him.
of like.
No, I mean, he's a really good player, but I think they kind of look deeper than that, and they're probably more big picture than that, to be honest. We saw them too. I mean, they let Carlos Correa go, and then Jeremy Pena comes in and wins World Series MVP. So I don't know enough about the prospects or who they think is going to replace Bregman at third, but I'm sure they've been thinking about this for a long time down the line. I don't think they're probably going to push all their chips in. It'd be one thing if it was like Bregman and Altuve, like multiple guys are going to be free agents.
Yeah, Altuve they extended.
But they have enough good players. It wasn't like the Angels with Ohtani, where Ohtani was kind of like the main guy by far, and you really wanted to get him in. It had been a long time. Let's push in our chips the way they did last year. I don't think that would be the case with the Astros with Bregman, but I do think they're going to be smart about it and figure out what they want to do with him going forward and how they want to approach that at the deadline. But I don't think they're going to be any more aggressive or any more desperate or anything to kind of get in there, because they're going to have a plan that's going to, they're a smart organization.
Yeah, they've been, next man helping for years, and it's been working out great. So I imagine that will continue to be the case for this team. Anthony, any other thoughts on your arch nemesis?
Yeah, it's just going to be. I just love that the rivalry that's really developed between the Rangers and the Astros, especially now that both teams are good. For forever, one team was really good and the other was really bad. Back when the Rangers, in the early 2010s, when Rangers were good, the Astros were very bad. And then the Astros got really good and the Rangers were very bad. And now both teams are really good. So I do think I'm excited for that rivalry this year, for the next few years to come. So it's going to be fun.
It was like a little bit from like 15 and 16. I think both those games that was kind of like the genesis of the rivalry, I feel like. As we had the Astros playing the NL Central up until, I think, 2014. I want to say that was the start of it. It's been 10 years now in the American League.
It's been a little bit longer than that, has it not?
I was still working for MLB. It might have been 2000. Was it 2014? That was a couple years before that, but I know it wasn't that long ago. Yeah,
I thought it was 14.
It sounds right though. Maybe I know it hasn't been that long when they came over, but I was still covering the Twins. But yeah.
Okay, I just looked it up, and they moved over in 13 was their first year in the
13.
ALS. So pretty much.
All right, 93.5 for the Houston Astros, which is a team that last year was a quote-unquote down year and they came within a game of going to the World Series and probably winning the World Series.
I'll go with the over. I think they're going to win like 95. I still really like their lineup a lot and think they're going to score a ton of runs. I think they have enough pitching that I think that some of the guys took a step back last year should get a little better. Barring like a lot of injuries, I think they're going to be fine. I don't think they're going to win the World Series or anything, but I think they're still going to win the division. But I think it's going to be close, neck and neck with them and the Rangers all year. Like I think I had the Rangers winning like, lower 90s. So I think they'll probably win more like mid 90s and it'll be a great race. I think the Rangers have a little bit more overall depth and less injury concerns than the Rangers do, but and a little bit better of an elite back end of the bullpen. But it's going to be a really fun race all around. And I think it's going to be the top two teams in Texas are going to be the ones in the division here. I can see it going either way, but I think just on paper, I think the Astros are just a little bit better than the Rangers.
I respect your opinion. I disagree.
I figured as much.
But obviously, I'm a diehard Rangers fan. But when I look at the Astros, they're going to be a great team. I think there are question marks in that rotation that we saw some regression last year from the previous year. I think there's a couple question marks in the lineup. Jose Abreu struggled mightily in the first half last year. It did pick it up. Absolutely. But we'll see what he can do in his age 37 season coming up. Verlander is 41 years old now. What's he going to be able to do? Still, he did regress. He's still a very good pitcher last year, but he did regress. His 144 strikeouts in 162 innings. It was his lowest K per nine since 2014, I believe, is what I looked up. So he's probably not the pitcher he used to be as he continues to get older. They're still going to be really good. The offense is great. I have them at 92 wins, so just very slightly on the under in second place in a wild card.
I think that's fair.
One thing that we didn't mention, they do have a new manager. Joe Espada is now the manager of the Houston Astros. I do think that the end of last season was a little odd for Houston. Like something just sort of felt off in terms of they got swept by Kansas City. I think that was in like late August. It was just kind of a weird vibe. And I wonder if Dusty's pending retirement or anything of that had any impact, if at all, in that situation. But they do have a new manager coming in, and it seems like, I mean, I did actually, I met Joe Espada briefly at the winter meetings. I was impressed in like the 2 seconds that I talked to him. But no, I think this team is the best team in this division, once again. And I think they're just a well-oiled machine. I like Yainer Diaz, too. He quietly batted .280 last year with 23 homers, 846 OPS. I've got the Astros winning the division again. This is how many years in a row now? I think they didn't win it in 2020. I think they've won it every other year, right? From 17 on.
To be fair, they tied last year, but they had the tiebreaker.
That's semantics.
So this would be their 8th division title in 9 years.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to do it. I'll go with a 93.5. I'll go 96 wins. Which actually, I feel like that makes me think that I should be a little. Well, we got to talk about this last team first. Okay. What do you have on Seattle, Anthony?
Yeah, very good team. Obviously, they a lot of people had them even up there last year, possibly winning the division. Mid-90s wins. I know a lot of people were thinking that they could do that last year. Kind of underperformed a little bit, but really came on at the end and almost made the playoffs at the end of last season, winning 88 games. They're very good team. A lot of changes, though, to this team. To name a few guys that are no longer on this team, Teoscar Hernandez, Jared Kelenic, Robbie Ray, Suarez, the third baseman there who had some pop. Those guys are no longer on the team. They do add a guy like Mitch Garver, who has a ring now, so you get some championship pedigree into the middle of that lineup, likely at DH, may get some time at catcher from now and again. But you have that lineup. You got J.P. Crawford. Obviously, Julio Rodriguez is going to be a perennial MVP candidate for years to come. Really, where you have where this team makes their money and wins their games is that rotation, which is stellar, from Luis Castillo. George Kirby could be my good friend Nathan Santodomingo, a big Mariners fan, says, watch out, George Kirby's winning the Cy Young. I don't know if that's going to happen, but he is a young stud, 26 years old, and he had a 3.2 or 3.3 ERA last year, I believe. So expect some big things out of him. And they got a couple younger guys too that are itching to get some more playing time and make a name for themselves too.
I don't think the George Kirby Cy Young pick is crazy. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
they're a solid team. I think they're still a few pieces away from being as good as the Rangers or the Astros. I think they just really haven't done that the last couple of years. They're kind of seeing what their payroll is kind of stuck where it is. They just don't go above and beyond the way the fans would want them to, in a sense. And really, I think this team could be really elite if they kind of put more money into it, in a sense. I think that's some of the players have been frustrated by that. You saw it last year. Cal Raleigh said at the end of the year, some of their trades this offseason were for salary reasons too. So that part of it's a little tough, but same thing. The core of players there is great. J.P. Crawford, of course. And I think Julio could be even better this year. I mean, Julio really, in some ways, had a little bit of a sophomore slump, even though the overall numbers ended up being pretty good by the end of it. But he really got off to a slow start, and so did the team. And really, even in the last couple of years, they're a team that really has gotten off to slow starts and then kind of picked it up later in the year. So maybe this year, if they get off to a better start, that'd really help them to kind of not have that issue of falling so far behind. So I like them, and I love that rotation. I really do. But I still just don't think they have the horses the same way that the Astros or the Rangers do. But they're a very good team. I could see them, more in the high 80s type of team, more than a team that wins, 90 games. But I do like that lineup a lot, especially at the top. I think they're going to score some runs and then definitely be a team that's going to pitch well in the starting rotation. I don't know if Kirby's going to win the Cy Young, but his control is impeccable. It's really amazing. Logan Gilbert too. They've got a lot of good young arms in that. Matt Brash and some of these guys. So they got some guys who can miss some bats. So they're definitely a fun team to watch.
Love the pitching staff. They do a really good job of kind of repatching their bullpen when they have to. They do a good job of picking up guys, kind of like buying low, and then sometimes they sell them for higher. They did that when they were rebuilding, but I love their pitching. I think our big hang up on the Mariners last year, Anthony, going into the year, where we're saying, we were talking about we thought Houston would run away with the division. Like you thought that last year.
I even said so. Yeah, they were. I said that. Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about what's the situation for like each of these teams that's interesting in order for them to actually be a team that could compete with them. And the thing we said was they need Jared Kelenic to emerge as the player that they hoped he would be. Mm-hmm. They just kind of need a couple of those guys to take a step forward. They needed like another big bat in that lineup. And I think that was kind of a big thing with their lineup last year was, I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of scoring runs, but it felt like, Julio had a very, very poor start to the season, as you mentioned, right? And yet he somehow, I think he finished 4th in MVP voting.
I know it's up there. He definitely had a great finish of the year and still put up really good numbers. He's always going to put up those power speed numbers and that kind of stuff. I could see him being better for sure this year. And I think he was top 4 because obviously the 2 Ranger guys were 2nd and 3rd, and Ohtani won it. So I think he was top 4, and he even talked about it this spring that he called it a sophomore slump and was disappointed in himself, which isn't too bad for 23 years old now or something. He's still a really young guy. He's going to be, he already is a superstar, but he's going to be a budding one that's going to be a problem in this division for a lot of these teams for sure.
I remember last year I was doing some piece where it was like I was giving my top 5 MVP candidates or top 5 awards candidates for each award. And I was looking at all the AL stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, JP Crawford was like a top 8 or 9 player in the American League this year.
Yeah, it's amazing. He really has developed. He's come a long way. You know, he was a first rounder, I think, by the Phillies maybe or before he got traded over.
Yeah, Phillies, yep.
Yeah,
The
Long
Gene
Beach
Segura
guy.
trade.
Yeah, he's a Long Beach guy. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive the way he's really developed into a leader too. He's a big part of that franchise. You know, great shortstop, but has gotten better offensively, and he's become kind of a face of that franchise. You know, that organization needed that, some of that leadership after losing. You know, Kyle Seager was there for a long time, kind of the face. Crawford's done a good job of stepping up, and obviously, you know, Julio is going to be the face going forward, being the young guy. And Julio, his English has gotten really good too. It's really fun to see him kind of grow as a superstar and as an ambassador for his city, because he really is going to be. He already is, but he's really going to be a big star in this division, especially. So it's fun to watch him, and I always enjoy going up to Seattle and seeing him play. And yeah, that rotation's nasty. So I think they've got a chance. You know, if they win the division, would it be a shock? No, they have got enough people, but I just don't think they have quite as much depth or quite as many star quality players as the Rangers or the Astros at this point.
Also, Mitch Haniger comes back home. We love to see
Yeah,
it.
how about that? A guy that can't really stay healthy, so we'll see how many games he'll actually play this year. So below 80 is probably a good bet.
All right, you guys want to guess the over/under total?
89, 88.
I was going to say like 87, 88. Yeah.
86.5.
Ooh. Huh. That's a tough one then, because it's a little lower than I expected, but it kind of makes sense because jeez. I would say then, I guess going over all the time, other than the poor A's. But I guess I'd see them winning like 88 games. I still think they're good. I just don't think they're like a 90-win team, but I don't think they're like a low 80-win team either. They have enough in that rotation. If they're healthy, they should be better than that. So yeah, I'm gonna say just slightly over on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're a very good team. I don't think they're a great team though. For like kind of agreeing with you, Rhett. I think there's a lot of question marks in the second half of that lineup too. It doesn't really move the needle too much for me. A guy like Mitch Haniger, who batted 209 last year in San Francisco. A couple of other guys. Ty France had a down year last year. We'll see if he can maybe pick it up a little bit. Josh Rojas, likely playing third base a little bit for them. Doesn't have a huge bat. Jorge Polanco's coming over from the Twins as well. Decent player, but not a superstar with the bat, to say the least. So you think you got a couple of question marks on that lineup. The pitching is great. It could be the best pitching in the American League West as it stands right now. But I think there's a lot of question marks with that lineup. And that's why I had them at 86 wins and 76 losses.
I am actually going to go over because this team last year, I mean, I kind of feel like we're talking about them like they were kind of disappointing last year, which they were because the expectations were very high in Seattle, but they were leading that division. It was a 3-way race for the division entering the month of September. They had this amazing run, and it was like they ran out of gas once they got into September, but they had an amazing run from like end of July through August. All of a sudden, now they're in first place. I mean, they made up so many games, and it was almost, I think part of it was I do feel like they kind of ran out of time. And they won 88 games last year. Up into that final weekend of the season, they were jockeying for a postseason berth. They had a chance to win the division. They had a chance to earn a wild card. They came up short. It's going to be interesting to see how some of these new position players fit in. How is this a better concoction, a better permutation of personalities and talents? But I mean, still won 88 games last year. I think I just love their pitching staff too much. I actually will have them. I'll give them 90. So I have them one game better than Anthony's Rangers.
Oh,
Wow.
come on.
The Rangers are better than the but I did pick the Astros to win the division. But yeah, but no,
Rangers just have to prove you wrong again, Jack.
Yeah, they feed off Jack's negativity. That's what they do.
That's why I do it.
You feel
That's why I do it. I want Anthony to text me or call me in a month and just be like, the Rangers are 27 and 6. Like, what are you doing?
And Wyatt
Langford
already has 13 bombs.
I think it speaks to how good this division is, though. That you could, would you guys agree? Do you think that all three of those top teams are capable of winning the division this year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's that much difference. A team from high 80s to mid 90s, it's not like that much variance. I mean, yeah, absolutely, you can see that. I mean, I'd be a little surprised because the Mariners didn't do anything, at least not in my mind. They didn't get better this offseason in my mind. They got a little worse. And maybe guys will hit. Maybe that new mix will hit better. Maybe they'll actually will win more games early and be more consistent and not just be a team that goes crazy at the end. Maybe that'll be a little more, more consistent. But I just don't see their talent level being quite as high as the other two. But not by that much. So it's like I could see them winning the division. But
how about a guy like Dominic Canzone? Could you see him being like a breakout?
Yeah, I think ESPN had him as one of their breakout guys. One of their big stories, talking about how he's been a big time chance for breaking out. So yeah, it'll be fun to watch. Absolutely.
I mean, they clear out Kelnick. He's going to get more of an opportunity in left field, I imagine. And I also think that they, with one thing that's worth noting on Kelnick is that they went on that huge run after he got injured last year. So
that is true. It's always, you never know if that's just cause or correlation or not. But
it's interesting to me that they gave up on him at this point. I don't know what happened there. I hope for his own sake. I mean, it's a great situation for him to fit in Atlanta. Be great to see him kind of reach the heights of what we think he could be. He's still a really young kid, but just did not pan out the way. And he had a really strong start to last season too.
Yeah, his April was very good, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was. He had a fantastic. It was like, I think Mario texted me and he's like, it's like Julio and Kelnick swap bodies last April.
It'll be fun.
All right, well,
we can project all day, but the games aren't played on paper, right? That's what the saying goes. So it's going to be a fun season coming up.
Coming up quick too. So
I'm giving Texas some bulletin board material. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this division before I give you guys a chance to plug your social media projects, anything of that nature? Anything else on these divisions?
How many playoff teams do you think come out of this division?
It's a good question. I mean, I do think.
Did you say 3, Jack?
I think 3. I can still see the Mariners winning 88 and making a wild card. Yeah, or making one of the wild cards.
Yeah, I think that's possible, but I think if I'm guessing, I'm going 2 teams, Rangers and Astros. So, but we'll see. The Mariners are absolutely capable.
Same. Yeah, I don't see anybody come from the Central.
No one from the Central.
It just depends on how the team in the East end up. I mean, I think the Orioles are the best team in the East. And then are the Yankees a surprise team? Are they allowed to be the surprise team for the Yankees? And the Red Sox, I don't really believe in at all. And the Blue Jays are interesting, and the Rays are always, you never know. Yeah, the Rays are crazy. So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's Baltimore. Yeah, I think you could pretty much easily whittle it down to these teams. It's Baltimore, Tampa, Yankees, and then these 3 teams and the Blue Jays. Like, those are your teams that 2 of them are going to get division titles, and the other 5 will probably go for 3 spots.
Yeah,
and then the AL Central, someone will win it. Maybe it's Cleveland.
Well,
someone's got to.
Maybe it's Minnesota.
Maybe Minnesota, yeah, for sure again. And then Detroit.
Or,
chance, I guess.
Maybe Kansas City.
Yeah, they've made some additions, but yeah, it's a pretty rough division.
Watch out for Cole Reagans with Kansas City.
Yeah, that guy's nasty. Yeah, that guy's throwing like 101.
Wish Rangers still had him.
Yeah, he's pretty nasty.
I was thinking about bringing that up to you, Tex. I was going to ask that question, so I'm glad you brought it up. Have you seen the pitching ninja video? It's Cole Reagans and Cole Hamels, like side by side.
I don't think I have.
He looks identical to Cole Hamels in his delivery.
Yeah, he's just going to be he's going to be a stud. He just didn't get as big of an opportunity with the Rangers, and we obviously sent him packing for Chapman. Didn't quite work out for us, you could say. However, when you win a World Series title, every move worked out, in my opinion. So I'm not too mad about it.
Rhett, anything else before we? No.
I think that's
okay,
it.
so
I'm excited for the season though.
All right. So first, Anthony, give us your. Tell us where people can check out your work, what you're up to right now, your social media, all that good stuff.
It's not that important. I mean, to this podcast, to the sports world, I'm not a sports writer. I'm not anything like that, but I am writing weather content. I'm a meteorologist for the San Antonio Express News. So go to expressnews.com and you can check out my stories. I'm writing a bunch of weather articles, weather explainers for San Antonio and statewide Texas weather stories. So check me out there.
Rhett?
Yeah, you can find my work at MLB.com or Angels.com. I'm the Angels beat reporter for MLB.com. I've covered the Angels since 2019. Covered the Twins before that. You can find my work at the website, or I have a newsletter that comes out twice a week on Fridays and Mondays. So today it just came out. Today's newsletter was about the base running changes they've made under Ron Washington. They're stealing a lot more bases this spring and just being more aggressive, and how Trout might run a little bit more too. So newsletter is a fun way to kind of connect twice a week. And then, and then my content's all there at MLB.com and Angels.com. And at Rhett Bollinger on X or Twitter, whatever the kids call it. So.
Well, guys, thank you so much for your time today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jack.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks, Jack. It's always fun to come on the show.
All right. Now I'm going to play the audio that I got. So this is something, as I mentioned before, we do this each year. Mario Lanza, for those who are unfamiliar with his work, he does a fantastic job. He check out his website, funny115.com. He's done different podcasts. He's covered the show Survivor for a while. I know we have quite a few reality TV fans that listen to this show. He does a great job, and he's a lifelong Seattle Mariners fan. So every single year he does this. He sends a voice message, and he gives his take. He gives a little preview on the team. It's audio only, so if you're watching here on YouTube, I'll throw up a picture, and you guys can hear the audio of what Mario has to say.
Hello, and welcome to the Jack Vita Show, the #1 sports podcast available on the internet today. In fact, some would call it the Parvati Shallow of sports podcasts. My name is Mario Lanza, and every year Jack wants me to come on and do a little preview for my beloved Seattle Mariners. And I guess I should give people a little backstory again, just reminding people who I am. I'm just some random average Joe from Seattle, grew up in the Kingdom. I was at many Mariner games back in the day, between 1981 and the day they imploded it. And so I have a long storied history with the Mariners. I don't write for any Mariner blogs or anything. I don't really have anything to do with the online Mariners community. Frankly, I find most online Mariner fans to be rather insufferable, so I try to stay away from them. Very negative. They had a little hissy fit this offseason, which was nice. It's fun to watch. Anyway, I am here to share my thoughts on the Seattle Mariners. Jack always wants me to come on here. So, this year, the 2024 Mariners, I am probably more optimistic than most. And a lot of this is because of what I said last year. And you can go back and listen to the preview I did for Jack. I'm pretty sure I said this last year. I'm like, the 2023 Mariners are going to be really good. I think I said they're going to be contenders for the playoffs. If they get into the playoffs with the pitching staff they have, they could do a lot of damage. And I still believe that. They came really close. That's the thing. I think a lot of people in the offseason were mad. Oh, the Mariners didn't make the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. It was a failure of a season in 2023. But if you look back at it, they only missed the playoffs by 1 game, 2 games. They were in it until literally the last 2 days of the season. And if you want my personal opinion, and I know this is a biased Mariners fan saying this, but I think they came really close to winning a World Series last year, and I don't think they got enough credit for it. I think if they do not have that massive slump to start the season that digs them into the hole, then they make the playoffs pretty handily. So they kind of were their own worst enemies. And had they got into the playoffs, I think they would have done really well because they were the type of team with that rotation that really could have done some damage. So I don't really look at last season as a failure. I look at it, damn, they came close to a World Series last year. They really did. And I got to say this. The reason they didn't win a World Series last year is not because Dipoto, not because the management, not because ownership is cheap. The players just choked. And I hate to say that, but all the guys they got rid of in the offseason, Suarez, Teoscar Hernandez, Kelenic, it was ugly watching them the last couple weeks of the season, them just flailing away at these sliders outside. And I remember one particular game against the Braves last year at the end of the season where they had a runner, I think, on second or third in a tie game late in the game with no outs. And it was like Suarez, Julio, and all these guys in the middle of the order. And nobody could move him over. And Julio has to kind of take the blame for that too. He really choked at the end of last season. So again, that's when they got rid of a lot of those guys in the offseason, I know a lot of Mariner fans were having little panic attacks like, oh my God, we're trading our team. We're cheap. And really that wasn't, in my opinion, what wasn't happening. To me, it was like, yeah, they were getting rid of all the guys who choked in September because they strike out too much. You can't build a team around guys who cannot come through in the clutch and cannot move runners over. And there was one at bat I remember Kelenic had against a lefty in September. It was like watching me try to hit a professional pitcher. He was never going to hit him in 100 years. So I was quite pleased with the offseason, the Mariners offseason. Again, that's not maybe a controversial take, but I feel like we got rid of some dead weight that was hindering us. And I hate to say this because he's our superstar, but I hope it kind of lit a fire under Julio's butt a little bit. You can't be striking out in the clutch like that. This is what happens. People get dumped. So anyway, what I said last year was, and this was right, I said the 2023 Mariners are going to be really good. And I did say, and that's exciting because the 2024 Mariners are going to be even better. That was my stance a year ago. And I still stick by that. I think they have the potential. Again, nothing's ever set in stone, especially when you're a Seattle Mariners fan. Nothing's set in stone ever. But on paper, this is without question one of the highest ceiling Mariner teams they've ever had. And I don't know if people realize that. And a lot of was focused in the off season on the additions and subtractions. But here's one thing that didn't change. We had a potential all-world rotation last year, and we lost none of them. We lost Marco Gonzalez, who was not included in that group. But the rotation of Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, Bryce Miller, and Brian Wu, there has never been a Mariners rotation with a higher ceiling than that. And they're all better than last year in theory. They're all older. Miller and Wu kind of ran out of steam as the season went along last year, which admittedly they were rookies. So that's going to happen. That was part of the Mariners' problem last year, too. They had so many rookie pitchers they were relying on to throw innings, and they just were gassed. They were done by the end. They just couldn't handle that workload. But they're all back. The Mariners lost none of their rotation. So I just want to remind people of that when I'm not talking out of my butt here. When I say they're a better team than this year just because they're older, they're a better team than last year. Yeah, so that's the one thing I want Mariner fans to remember. Yeah, you might not like the ownership. They might be cheap. I know there's not a lot of Dipoto and Service fans out there. I happen to love Dipoto and Service, but our rotation has the potential to be elite, like world-class elite. These are historic rotations when you see some of the the spin rates and the whips that these guys are putting out, and they're all very young. And George Kirby's the one in particular. I think that guy has the potential to be something really special. In fact, I don't know if you Seattle fans might know this, but other fans might not, that Peter Gammons was recently in the Mariners camp. He came just a couple weeks ago. He's visiting them in spring training, and he specifically said what I just said. He's like, George Kirby, and he said, he reminds me of Greg Maddux. And he just certain things that he does reminded him of John Smoltz also. Gammons could not say enough about George Kirby and the future this kid has with his control and some of the stuff he has. So anyway, if you are a Mariners fan being all doomy and gloomy, you should not be, because we have never had a pitching staff anything remotely like this before. And they're going to be good this year. They probably will be better next year. Again, a lot of this depends on injuries, but I am not alone in pointing out how good Seattle's rotation has the potential to be. If everything clicks, this is the type of stuff that you dream of on these baseball teams. So just wanted to throw that out there. Other questions about the Mariners. The big thing this year will be injuries. Their floor is a lot higher than last year. They should be more consistent. They shouldn't go into these huge long stretches where everyone just strikes out and they can't hit for a month, which has always been the Mariners' problem. They've got rid of some of the problem children. They brought in these people who are more consistent, like Polanco, and Mitch Haniger's back. They should be more stable. But the catch is a lot of the people they brought in have been injury prone in the past, and that's kind of going to be the big bugaboo this year for the Mariners. Can they stay healthy? Odds are probably not. It will come down to depth in some of these positions. Like, I love Mitch Haniger. When Mitch Haniger is on, he's great. It's hard to rely on him being there every day. Perhaps not his fault. But, yeah, he is not the type of person you're always going to get 600 at-bats out of. Let's just put it that way. And, Polanco's kind of the same way at second base. Again, these guys are much higher floor on paper, but you never know how injuries are going to play out. That's always the issue with these guys. So, but I do think the offense will be more stable this year. Julio, hopefully, is more consistent. And this is something last year I was like, it was almost embarrassing to watch him at times in the first half last year. He was really bad. I don't think people realize how big a hole he dug himself in the first half of last season, to the point that it's astounding. I think he finished, fourth in MVP voting at the end. And he's like, yeah, he was an amazing Silver Slugger player. He had one of the worst April and Mays of any superstar you're ever going to see. So that was like a 4-month stat line he put up. And again, he kind of choked at the end too. But if Julio ever put together a full season, it's going to be really scary to watch if he can actually do that. And again, this is only his third season. So I think people, myself included, maybe need to cut him a little slack. He's very young. He's got a lot of pressure. But yeah, it is. You do have to point out he kind of choked last year. He was kind of the reason they didn't make the playoffs. So got to say it. I have faith in J.P. Crawford. Big season last year. Love him at shortstop. I really want to see what he's going to do this year. It's like he finally started to believe in himself, and the fans started to believe him in last year. He was our MVP really last year. He was outstanding. He was pulling out this power that no one thought he'd ever have, and then he's got great defense. So J.P. Crawford is kind of how the team goes, him and Julio, obviously. Cal Raleigh, unsung hero behind the plate. Mitch Garver, our new DH, is going to be a huge addition. It's really fascinating seeing these guys who are position players, and now you just tell them, now you're just a DH. You're never going to be a position player again. We're going to hit you. And he's like, wow, that's going to be interesting. I wonder how that's going to go. So I always wonder about the mentality of that, just because I will say I played baseball growing up all the way into American Legion, so after college. So I was playing against guys who ended up making the majors eventually, but I wouldn't say I was like great or anything, but I was to the point where I was playing where you start to get the sense maybe you could play this later in life, like in college and stuff. So I know the mentality there, that DH, when you go from playing in the field and then just switching to DH, it's very weird. I had a hard time with that as a kid. I didn't like playing DH. It's so odd. Like the at-bats just sort of gain a little more pressure. Every at-bat has a little more pressure on you. Like you make 2 outs in a row, you're like in your head by at that point when you're a DH. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. I think looking at his past stat line, he'll be very valuable, and that is certainly something Seattle has missed in the past, the DH, a solid, consistent DH. So I really think a lot will be riding on how well Mitch Garver does, how much pressure he can take off some of these other guys in the lineup. And let's see, 2 more things before I sign off. There's a couple unsung / big variables in their lineup this year. One of them I got to bring up, Dominic Canzone. They have mentioned him. How many people have mentioned how different he looks? How he came to spring training, he's all jacked up. He's way more bulked up than he ever was in the past, to the point that he's almost unrecognizable. And so I've seen a lot of people say, if someone's going to have a weird breakout season you weren't expecting, it'll be this guy Dom Canzone, who all of a sudden is like jacked. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But there's one guy I have not mentioned in the whole Mariners lineup, and I do have to bring him up. This is Ty France, our first baseman. Now, let me preface this by saying I hope I'm wrong about this. I would love to say I am wrong about this. But my opinion is he was the first person that we should have dumped in the offseason. And I hate to say that because I like the guy and he's part of the team, but the production he was putting out at first base last year is not acceptable for a first baseman. And they seem to love him on the team. Like he's like considered an untouchable. And I don't think he should have been. Like, if I was a GM, he's the first guy I would have dumped in the offseason just because I just don't think he was adding much. So it really surprises me because I have a lot of faith in Jerry DiPoto and their development team that they must see more in Ty France than I do, because I thought he was the problem last year. And they clearly didn't. So I am quite surprised he is still on the team at first base and he's still considered an untouchable. If you're a Mariners fan, you know this. Other fans might not know this, but he apparently went to Driveline, did all this training in the offseason, completely revamped his hitting style, his approach, his game, his mental approach, to the point that is the big story on the Mariners right now. Wow, Ty France really changed his whole style. He really did a renovation on himself, and they're very fascinated to see what he's going to do. If he comes out of the gate really strong, it would make such a difference on this team. So, again, I hope I'm wrong. I would love to say I was wrong about Ty France, and I'll go on this podcast next year and say it that, okay, I was wrong. They were right to keep him. I was wrong. But at the moment, he's the one guy I'm surprised is still in this lineup because I felt he was a big problem last year. He makes a lot of outs for the limited noise he creates. Let me just put it that way. So, there's my one little asterisk. And before I sign off, again, I've talked about the pitching, talked about the hitting. I haven't talked about the bullpen. In theory, we have, as they always say, the 3-headed Hydra. We got, Munoz, Brash, and Santos, who, if all those guys are on, that is basically the game is over by the 7th inning. As always, with the Mariners, you learn not to take this for granted. There's no guarantee they will ever all be on or all be healthy. In fact, Matt Brash right now is already raising little question marks over his health. But in theory, again, people say if these guys are all clicking, it's just like the rotation. Man, if you had that 5-man rotation all clicking, if you have this 3-headed monster in the bullpen all clicking, there's honestly probably not a better pitching staff in the American League. And I'm just a Mariners fan saying that. So of course I'm going to say that. But I do think Mariner fans have a lot to be hopeful for this season. It's a very exciting team. It's better than last year's team, and it really always has been. I don't know why people were so whiny during the offseason. We got rid of a couple big problem children. So I'm excited to see this team. As always, Jack asked me for a Mariners prediction, and as always, I give him, I always love to reference Saturday Night Live and the Bears and Mike Ditka when I say my prediction is the Mariners will go 159-3 this year. No, they're not going to go 159-3. But I do think we will be in the playoff race, same as we have been for the last 3 years. Again, even though the Mariners only made the playoffs one time in 3 years, they missed the playoffs by like one game the other 2 years. So we were right there 3 years in a row. This is actually a very nice golden age of Mariners optimism, and it's about the best stretch we've had in a long time, maybe ever, to be honest. So I think they'll be very good this year. I think right there in the playoff hunt. I hope they make the playoffs. And if they do, because if they do, this is one of those types of teams, again, that can do a lot of damage. I'm hoping they do. I'm cautiously predicting 91 wins, only because the injuries. I think the injuries will keep you from being a truly dominant team. They're never always going to be healthy out there. But when they're on, the Mariners are a scary team. So I have high hopes for them, and I think they'll be good this year. I think they'll be even better next year. So I think other people should be cautiously optimistic about them too. As always, go Mariners, and thank you, Jack.
Oh my gosh, I'm cracking up at that comparison. The Parvati Shallow of podcasts. That is something. That's the Jack Vita show. Okay, so thank you, Mario, for submitting that. That was fantastic, as always. And thank you all for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed our preview here of the AL West. We've still got a bunch more of these previews. We've got division previews for every division. We've got guests on other episodes that include Bob Nightingale, Dan O'Dowd, Patrick Lyons, Jesse Friedman, some other people. We're lining up all these plans. This was recorded on March 4th at the time of this recording. So make sure you subscribe to the Jack Vita Show here on YouTube. Subscribe to this channel. This is Jack Vita Show Sports. And if you want the entertainment and reality TV coverage, currently covering Deal or No Deal Island. We were covering the traders. We've got some interviews on there. That's the Jack Vita Show Entertainment YouTube channel. But subscribe to this one for all your sports content because this is the only place you'll be getting that. And then you can also subscribe to the Jack Vita Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Jack Vita, bringing the dancing lobsters.